Good evening and welcome to the 2nd of November 2020 meeting of the Cabinet. My name is Councillor Doug Oliver, Leader of the Council. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording of it will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phone on silent if they have one near them, leaving their cameras on and mute their microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and saves a bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. I will first do a roll call to check all members who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm you are connected. Members of Cabinet, Councillor Christine Bayliss.
Present.
Councillor Jay Brewerton.
Present.
Councillor Terry Byrne.
Present.
Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Present.
Councillor Catherine Field.
Present.
Councillor Sue Projac.
Present.
Councillor Hazel Timpey.
Present.
And Councillor Jonathan Vinehall.
Present.
There are several other members that have joined us today, and perhaps I could ask Julie, as you have the list, that you could go through the list and they can confirm they're connected and present, and any additional ones that have come in under the radar could state their name. Thank you.
So we should have Councillor John Barnes here.
Present.
We should have Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Cortell.
Present.
Councillor Curtis.
Present, Miss.
Councillor Drayson.
Present.
Councillor Ganley.
Present.
Councillor Palmer.
Present.
Councillor Maidley.
Present.
Councillor Maynard.
Present.
Councillor Osborne.
Present.
And Councillor Stevens.
Present.
I think that's all, Chairman.
Thank you. There's no others.
Councillor Kirby Green.
Right, thank you, Eleanor. Officers joining us today are Malcolm Johnson, Chief Executive, Robin Venard, Assistant Director, Resources, Ben Hook, Head of Acquisitions, Transformation and Regeneration, Joe Powell, Head of Housing and Community, Tim Hickling, Head of Strategy and Planning, and Tony Baden, Finance Manager. Democratic Services Officer and Committee Clerk today is Julie Hollands. Members of the committee will be making the decisions today by a formal, making the decisions today by a named vote. Julie will call out each member in turn and they will either answer for, against or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone again at this point. Please turn off again after voting. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only in the chat facility. Please be aware there can be a time delay of around 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen. Each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. Before we go into the agenda item, I've agreed with Malcolm that he will present some update following meetings he's had today with the Director of Public Health and also communications yesterday. So those that want to stay after the meeting, please do so. Okay, so agenda item 1, to resolve the minutes of the last meeting be confirmed as a correct record of the proceedings and will be signed by the chairman, myself, at a later date. Do you all agree?
So move. Agreed.
Thank you. Item 2, Julie, are there any apologies for absence?
No, there are no apologies, Chairman.
Right, a little bit of noise somewhere. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3. Julie, are there any additional agenda items, please?
Yes, we have one additional agenda item, which is agenda item 12, and it's to do with offering free parking in car parks.
Thank you. Agenda item 4. Julie, are there any urgent decision items?
Yes, we have one, which is agenda item 9, which is the neighbourhood plan for Burwash Parish Council.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, disclosure of interests. Members, please speak clearly if you have a personal and prejudicial, and say the agenda item it refers to. Right, so I've got Councillor Byrne.
Item 7, declare an interest, as I'm a member of the board of the Light Up Bexhill Community Interest Company. I believe that's could be a pecuniary interest as well.
Thank you. Councillor Christine Bayliss.
Yes, I've got a couple of things that I want to mention, Chair. The first is an amendment to the minutes of the 27th of July 2020. It's come to my attention that the interest that I declared was didn't reflect the interest that I verbally gave. And today, Democratic Services have updated those minutes to reflect my interest. The second one is to declare an interest in agenda item 7 this evening as a sponsor of Light Up Bexhill of a pecuniary and prejudicial interest, and I'll leave the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Hazel Timpey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To declare an interest as a director of Light Up Bexhill, prejudicial and pecuniary for 7.2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Dixon. Kevin.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 7. I'm a member of Battle Marketing Group. That is mentioned in the appendix report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Carl Maynard.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda items 10 and 11 as an executive member of East Sussex County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Okay. If we can hold on. Sorry,
Chair, Councillor Brewerton is indicating she has a conflict of interest that she'd like to declare.
Okay. She obviously hasn't got a chat facility. Okay. Jonathan Vinehall, Councillor Vinehall.
Certainly not a conflict of interest, but just for transparency, I coordinate the Robert Neighbourhood Plan Forum, which is just a forum for neighbourhood plan groups to help each other.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Drayson. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Item 7, Light Up Bexhill. I'm the treasurer.
Thank you. And Councillor Catherine Field. Catherine?
Yes, I guess 9 and 10. I'm a non-executive member of East Sussex County Council.
Jolly good. Thank you.
It's personal.
Personal. Thank you. Councillor Jay Brewerton.
Thank you, Chairman. So likewise, as with Councillor Bayliss, the minutes on the 27th of July do not accurately reflect what I declared, which was that I have a business that may be able to apply for a discretionary grant. So, and in item 8, which is my item, I do have 2 children, obviously at the Bexhill Cemetery, so that's a personal interest. Thank you.
Okay. Jolly good. No other interests, I don't think. No. Okay. So if we can move forward, please, to agenda item 6. I would just confirm that the members with a personal and prejudicial interest will be asked to temporarily leave the meeting at the start of the item, and Julie will invite you to rejoin once that item is finished. Right. So we're on to item 6. I'm not sure who's presenting this, Tony or Robin.
It's going to be me, Chair.
Thank you.
With Robin's support.
Okay, well, the floor is yours, Tony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so the report reviews the financial issues facing the council and the impact on the 5-year forecast. And this is essentially the first phase of the budget process, which culminates in, or will culminate in, February next year, when the council sets its budget and council tax. So in particular, members are recommended to continue with the council tax relief scheme for 21-22, and update the council's treasury management strategy with regards to its borrowing limits. Cross-refer members to paragraph 30. I shall come to that a little bit later on. And also to note the 5-year financial forecasts and maintain the policy of maximising income from council tax. Add any new homes bonus funding that we may get in 21-22 to reserves, and I'll come to that point in a bit more detail later on. And authorise the Assistant Director of Resources to finalise budget consultation with the portfolio holder for finance and performance, and continue our participation in the East Sussex Business Rates pool. So the headline figures are in. If members look to Appendix A, they'll see that it details a funding gap of some 4.5 million in 2021-22. And this reduces to about 339,000 by 2025-26. Appendix B then illustrates the impact that this has on our level of reserves, i.e. they'll reduce from about 14.9 million at the end of March this year to 3.5 million by March 2026. So I'm going to try and help committee to understand some of the finer points behind those numbers. Members should understand that whilst we think the numbers are robust, they're as robust as we can make them at the moment, and we have based them on the 2020-21 estimates. Hence, we're a little bit later than we would ordinarily like to have been to bring this report to Cabinet. But so we picked up hopefully as part of the impact of COVID-19. There are still several unknowns in the forecast, and it makes it very difficult to predict. And I'd just like to outline these for members what they are. Further and continuing lockdowns, as we've seen over the last couple of days, the continuing global economic uncertainty, Brexit, the uncertainty around future government funding. We recently received £350,000 about a couple of weeks ago, bringing our total additional funding from the government for this year to nearly £2.5 million, which is very welcome. And I'm not wishing to be ungrateful, but this won't necessarily continue beyond this financial year. And the planned government spending review, they've had to postpone that again, obviously due to the COVID situation. So we don't really know. We know that we're going to get a 1-year spending announcement for next year. That should come sometime in December. But beyond then, we don't really know what the funding situation looks like. And similarly, we don't know what the impact might be on our business rates income. And I'll touch on that point in a little bit more detail in a minute. So if we're moving on to into the body of the report, in paragraph 7 to 8, again, I'll talk about local government funding settlement. We expect it in December. It's quite late in the year, but we're not quite sure when. The spending review is taking place late November this month. So yeah, we have to sit tight and wait to see what happens. Business rates, we've done a little bit of commentary for members in paragraph 10. The government stated some while ago that they wanted to review how business rates are shared amongst councils. So that's still outstanding. We initially anticipated that any redistribution of the business rates would benefit county councils.
Right, I think you've frozen, Tony.
For us, if and when it happens, we don't even know when it's going to happen. But we estimate that a reset would cost us about £1 million in business rate income if it did work against us. So, excuse me. So in paragraph 11, I've said a little bit about the new homes bonus grant. The government has not announced whether new homes bonus funding will cease or if it will continue in another guise going forward. We've taken a very cautious assumption that it will cease from 2022-23 onwards. Should we get any further funding from New Homes Bonus Grant, then we would recommend that that be added to our reserves for reasons that hopefully become obvious as I go through the report. Council tax, paragraphs 12 to 13. Last year, the government set council tax increase cap at 2% or £5 increase on the average Band D, whichever was higher. For Rother, it works out almost the same whichever way we go, incidentally. Again, no announcement has yet been made on what those parameters are going to look like this year, but it seems prudent to assume that the same limits will remain, and any further increases would have to be done via a local referendum. We've also assumed a drop in council tax in our council tax base as a result of the furlough scheme ending. I know it's been extended for another month, but we're assuming that it will be ending at some point in the financial year. And we expect this to increase our number of council tax relief claimants. We have anticipated that will recover over forthcoming years, but it will take 2 or 3 years to come back to the former level that we saw before COVID. I've said a little bit about cost pressures in paragraphs 14 to 19. Homelessness, I think this is quite well documented now, and we expect these costs to increase. But we also hope that the temporary accommodation scheme, we have £3 million in the capital programme to purchase properties, and this will alleviate the need for us to use private sector renting, which is much more expensive. We hope that this will offset some of the pressure by reducing the costs going forward. But again, it's a very difficult one to predict. The financial plan includes some increase for staff pay and for non-pay inflation, and we also take account of staff turnover. That's people that leave the organisation, because there's always a time lag between somebody leaving and a new starter beginning. So other COVID impacts, we've made allowances in the plan for commercial rents. Whilst we haven't written off any commercial rent income at the moment, it seems prudent to assume that some businesses won't be able to carry on paying rent. So we've made some allowance in the medium-term plan for that. Similarly, we've done likewise for leisure facilities and for the Delaware Pavilion. All of these were picked up in the Q1 monitoring report that was taken to Cabinet several weeks ago. We expect that the COVID impact will last beyond 2021, but we do anticipate some kind of recovery from 21-22 onwards, albeit a slow recovery. And so the situation we expect will gradually improve beyond then. And the reason we feel that may be the case is we have frequent meetings and bulletins and updates with our Treasury Management Specialist, Link Asset Services. And that's their opinion of the global economic recovery, is that it will happen, but it may not be as quick as they would initially anticipate or would like to see. But hopefully members will appreciate that situation is still quite volatile and subject to change. There is a bit in the report about the corporate plan that's still being developed, but the key components are expected to be new housing development, a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030, and the continuation of our regeneration schemes. With regards to regeneration, we have the property investment strategy, as you know. This assumes the acquisition and development of certain sites across the district. And our assumption is that we'll fund these through borrowing. So this will greatly increase our borrowing costs in the early years, but it should bear fruit via increased rental income in future years. Obviously, we have to spend the money to bring in that income in the first instance. So you'll see that from the table that I referred to at the beginning of the report, the level of reserves, or the funding gap rather, reduces quite significantly over the 5-year period of the plan. And that is largely due to the rent income generation from the property investment strategy really sort of kicking in. I have to emphasise though to members, these are property deals, and there we have private sector tenants, and it's not without risk. Although we do consider that the tenants that we have in mind for some of the properties are comparatively low risk tenants. So for 21-22 budget, the table on page 6, if I can just draw members' attention to that table, it shows a budget projection for next year and illustrates just how big the changes have been from when we reported the MTFP to members back in to Cabinet back in February this year. You can see that the funding gap has increased by nearly £3 million. So things have changed significantly since then. There's also a piece about savings and income generation in the report. These targets have been incorporated into the medium-term plan, and they consist of work streams that are shown or detailed in a bit more information in paragraphs 22 to 23. It's imperative that we deliver on these savings because any shortfall will result in further pressure on reserves. The capital programme, that's as shown in Appendix C, and members will note that the total proposed investment is in the order of 186 million between 2020-21 and 25-26. And they'll also note that our borrowing requirement increases to about £79 million. And that explains the big jump in our revenue expenditure, particularly in next year. As a result, our Prudential borrowing limits, and these are limits that we have to set as part of our Treasury management strategy, we have to set them by law. We need to increase these, and we set out the limits, the increase in limits in the table in paragraph 30. And as I say, the drivers for this are mainly the property investment strategy and the housing schemes. So just to finish off, the reserves, there's a little bit about the reserves in paragraphs 24 to 26, a little bit more information that re-emphasises the position and highlights the importance of achieving the objectives of the work streams that I've mentioned just a few seconds ago in paragraph 22. And it also just highlights again the inherent risk of what might happen to our finances should the business rates review go. Should it disadvantage the council, it could have quite a significant impact on what our reserves position will look like by 25-26. So that's it from me, Chair. I'm quite happy. There's an awful lot of information in that report, so I'm quite happy to take any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as usual.
Thank you very much, Tony. Can I just, Robert, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Chairman, I think, as Tony said, it's an awful lot of information there. The council itself has got to make some big decisions over the next few months in order to deliver the targeted savings within the report. So I don't underestimate the challenge that the council faces, I think, with this financial situation that we see ourselves in, and the uncertainty over the government funding really doesn't help with that planning and the implementation of any change in how the council operates. But I think, as I say, Tony's picked up most of the questions, or most of the issues, I think, within the report. Thank you.
A significant amount of work's gone into this in a time of great uncertainty, and it's very, very difficult indeed for bring some of these figures together. Right, if there are questions of Tony, Councillor Paul Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of issues I'd like to raise. My first one is purely a point of procedure. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee have yet to consider this report, as it will already have been agreed by Cabinet. Will any points raised at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee be listened to?
Chairman, would you like me to respond?
Robin, if you can just respond to that, thank you.
Yes, I think obviously there will be in January time. You'll see Overview and Scrutiny Committee. You'll see the revenue budget proposals in a bit more detail, and that will include the actual forecast as well for the next 5 years. Plus, also effectively, this report starts the consultation process, so members have, in Overview and Scrutiny, have the opportunity to feed back through that consultation process as well if they want to do individually. But as I say, in terms of their overall having a discussion regarding our finances, that will happen in the January meeting of Overview and Scrutiny.
Does that cover off the point, Paul, that you wanted to make?
I thought, but I might be incorrect, that there was going to be a meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee sometime in the next month to look at this. But have I lost the thread while I've been in hospital?
No, Chairman. If I think if we can, we can report the MTFS or MTFP to the next meeting of Overview and Scrutiny, but also there will be that January meeting for the final discussion and final any references that Overview and Scrutiny want to make back to Cabinet before they make the final decision to recommend to Council in February.
Thank you.
So at the next meeting, will we be able to raise any substantial points which would be listened to? at the next meeting of the Review and Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah, absolutely. Those recommendations will go forward to Cabinet, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, sorry. Oh, you've got another point. Oh, okay, fine. Okay, carry on.
Sorry, Chair. My second point is about the council tax reduction scheme. I'd like to just express a view that it's unfortunate that due to the coronavirus, the process with the anti-poverty task group hasn't moved as rapidly as it otherwise would have done, and that as a result of that, there's the unfortunate recommendation that the present arrangements continue into 21-22, which might not have been the case had the committee considered things a few months ago. The second point I'd like to make is that, connected to that, is that the discretionary fund I would very much like to see the discretionary fund being more widely known and reaching more people, and I'm really pleased to learn that the Anti-Poverty Task Group are considering ways of enabling that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Paul, for your comments. Councillor Eleanor Kirby-Green, a question of Tony or Robin?
Yeah, it's really, I guess, a point. Obviously, there's a lot of work has gone into this, which is quite hard to digest. But correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I can see, this current administration inherited reserves of 18 million. And the suggestion now is that these reserves will be depleted by 2024.
Well done.
That's the glaringly obvious point that I take from this.
Yeah, well done. You can obviously look at the numbers and deduce from there what you what's there. But we are in a pandemic. It's been a very difficult time, and the future is certainly uncertain. But well done. Okay.
Sorry, can I just come back? It is uncertain. However, government funding has been provided to local councils to counter the impact of COVID-19, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you for those points. Noted. Councillor Mooney. Are you there, Martin? Right, he's not there. So perhaps I can invite Tony. You want to make some comment, perhaps, on the previous point that was made?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Kirby-Green is absolutely right. We've benefited from a lot of funding from the government this financial year to fight COVID. That's perfectly true, but it is still worth bearing in mind, as we reported in the Q1 monitoring report, it still doesn't cover everything, not by a long way. And I can't remember what the figure is off the top of my head. Robin might be able to help me out. He's got a better memory than me. But we're still about £2 million short, I think, as a result of COVID alone. So members should just bear that in mind, I think. Thank you.
Did you want to add to that, Robin, please, if you?
Yes, just to confirm, our forecast information that we provided the government was, over £3 million worth of lost costs and lost income, and the funding we've had so far is around 1.4 million. We've had an extra 650,000, which I think Tony referred to, around 2 million of funding, and that was to do with the additional relief we gave to those on council tax reduction, so that most people of working age weren't liable to pay anything towards their council tax this year. So we are short. We're still making those returns to government, so hopefully future funding will still come through, and we're very hopeful that will be the case. And we're still awaiting the announcement on our fees and charges claim, so there are a lost income claim as well. So we are hoping additional funds will come through, but it's likely that there will be a shortfall, I think, overall.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Martin, are you still with us? Councillor Mooney?
Yes, I am indeed. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. My question is the Assistant Director of Resources confident that the Council can continue to borrow to finance the capital programme, since it may well end up with all the risks involved, having not enough money in the kitty to meet current expenditure? it is a very big risk, this programme, huge.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you, Chairman. I think what we try to do is ensure that the investments we make in are with solid tenants and solid arrangements and lease provisions in place so that the risk to the authority is reduced and minimised as best we can. For example, with high quality commercial tenants or with public sector tenants as well, and those particularly obviously will be fairly gold plated, we would hope, in terms of the future. There are lots of options for the authority in terms of how it will generate revenue in the future, and our property investment strategy has two main themes to it. It's the regeneration activity in terms of protecting and enhancing job provision in the district, but also to generate a small revenue return to the authority overall. That will come with risk, as you said, and we have highlighted the risks of that within reports, this one and previous reports to members. So, but unfortunately, the alternative is that we reduce services significantly without that additional income. And clearly, what we need to do is make sure all our due diligence on those acquisitions or those developments is taking place and taking place with the prospective tenants to ensure that they are commercially viable or financially viable, and we protect the authority's finances in that way. Yes, you're right to highlight that there is considerable risk with this, but clearly we won't proceed with any development costs unless we got things signed and copper bottomed hopefully out before we actually progress and invest that money. So it's not quite a speculative investment. It is more tied to definite outcomes, we hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for making those points, and thank you, Robin, for your response. Councillor Charlie Clark, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just want to make a couple of points. Obviously, a lot of families are really suffering with income at the moment, but we do have on the council's website the Exceptional Hardship Fund, and I would encourage residents to use that, because I spoke to the benefits officer today. They've already dealt with 60 claims and are processing another 20. So we really need to make sure people are aware of this facility and make sure that everybody gets the help they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Councillor John Barnes.
Thank you, Leader. I don't envy our officers trying to steer through what is a very uncertain situation. The slight worry I have at the pace at which the reserves are going down is some of our better treasury management investments, which are currently bringing in good solid income, will have to be realised. I'm just wondering, and I put it very tentatively, one of our outgoings on revenue is on homelessness. I do wonder whether we can't make faster progress in bringing in some prefabricated units or other units. There are some available on the market which would house some of the homeless and limit some of our expenditure. I would hope that we could look at that pretty urgently in overview and scrutiny when we review homelessness in the near future, because it does seem to me that would actually operate to limit some of our spending. Clearly, if we can get on with housing, that will benefit our income. And so I think that is a vital part of our programme.
Thank you very much, John, for those comments. Are there any other members who would like to ask questions of Robin or Tony with regards to this report? Right, I'll ask Kevin Dixon, lead member, to make comments here and then look to move the motion. Kevin?
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Tony, and to Robin. This is the third iteration of this report that I've seen, and each time there's been big changes in the numbers. In fact, this is the best looking one of the three I've seen as well for the end figure. But of course, we've got so many unknowns, we've got so much uncertainty. There are lots of things that we just simply don't know, including our funding from government, if there is going to be any, new homes bonus, and a whole host of other things. And of course, ever since the agenda was published, we've now got a second lockdown. What effect is that going to have on our finances? What effect is that going to have on our income? We just don't know. And how much more expenditure are we going to have in the next 4 and possibly more weeks? So this whole document is a moving feast all of the time, and we've got to keep our eyes on it. To Councillor Mooney, I would say yes, there is risk, of course, in the corporate plan. There will be risk, but what is the biggest risk? Well, the biggest risk is to do nothing, because then we will run out of money. That's a certainty. So we have to take action to try and raise income to the authority, and that is what we are doing. Councillor Kirby-Green is simply being a little mischievous. These figures are not much different from when the previous administration was involved. We were scheduled to be using up our reserves to balance the budget. Of course, what COVID has done, that has accelerated that in a big way. And again, like I said, that could happen again, even more so in the next few weeks and months. We know that we've got to make some big decisions, and the whole cabinet is aware of that, and how we go with balancing the income against the expenditure on a normal year. Now, we're not in a normal year. We're not going to make much a chance to influence what happens in the rest of this budget year. And in fact, I don't think we're going to be able to do an awful lot about the repercussions into the next budget year. We've got to be looking at 2 or 3 years hence and making sure that we can either increase our income or reduce our expenditure so that the two figures broadly match. And that is the job that we must go on to with the budget setting process, and then with actions that we're going to take. So this is a very fluid situation. We are aware of what we've got to do, and we will be getting on and doing it. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. I would acknowledge the work that Tony, Robin and Kevin have put in order to bring these to the information level that we have at this meeting this evening. We're looking to vote on this. Kevin, are you going to propose that we take a vote?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to propose it. There's one other point I would like to make with Robin's help, if I can. Unfortunate timing has happened, and I'd like to get a message out along with Robin's help, as I said. Today we've had to start we had already started the process of issuing reminders for both council tax and for business rates. Now, the timing of this is obviously not ideal, because we're just about to go into a lockdown, and it's the last thing people want to know. What the purpose of this is doing is, one, it is a process we have to go through as a council, but secondly, we desperately need to hear from people who can't pay their bills. We can help. The team can help, and we can get something sorted. So people who have ignored any council tax or business rate demands so far, we need to know if they can't pay them or have got difficulty to pay them. So I would urge all councillors to please get this message out, and we will be getting the comms out as well from the council. But as I said, the timing of putting these reminders out is unfortunate, but unfortunately necessary. We didn't know there was a lockdown coming, just as seems anyone else. I don't know if maybe you can, before we move to the vote, you can ask Mr. Van Aert to just comment on that, please, Chairman.
Yeah, would you mind, Robin, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Members will know that we did effectively suspend major recovery action, as a result of the first lockdown, and we've very much tried to contact people on a more personal level to try and understand their issues in terms of paying their bills. These reminders are to people who have made no contact with us at all, and we haven't been able to make contact with either. So it very much is a call for action from these people to make contact with the authorities, so that we can make sure that they're getting the help they deserve or are entitled to, and make arrangements. Because unfortunately the debt won't go away. It is a debt we have to see either paid or covered by benefits or support, and therefore it is important that people do make contact with the authority. As you say, it's unfortunate in terms of timing, but it's important that this happens, and that we are able to help people. That's at the end of the day what we're trying to do.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I know we're going to emphasise this in our communications. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I'd like to move the recommendations to Council and the resolutions of Cabinet as printed, and I'd ask Councillor Field if she'd second for me.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. Julie, are you there, please?
Yes, councillors. So I will call your names out in alphabetical order, and you need to say for, against, or abstain. So, Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Councillor Brewerton.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
Sorry.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you, Robin and Tony, for your attendance this evening and the help that you've given us to get where we are at the moment. So if we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 7.
Chair, I'm about to leave the meeting. Do officers want me to hang up or just to shut off my video feed?
Chairman, for process, as councillors Bayliss, Byrne and Tempe have only really got interests regarding recommendation 2, you might want to discuss the report first and then take a vote on recommendations 1, 3 and 4, and then we can ask the 3 councillors to leave the meeting, and then the rest of Cabinet can discuss agenda item 2, and then we can call the members back into the meeting when we head on to agenda item 8.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Julie. Is that okay with those members that are involved? Yep.
Fine.
Thank you for that. Right, Ben Hook.
Thank you, Chair. So we're presenting tonight a report which stems from the discussions that were had at overview and scrutiny on the 14th of September. Officers made a number of recommendations to overview and scrutiny as part of the tourism events funding review that they had put onto the work programme. The recommendations were built out of a desire to see decision making over events funding devolve down to a more local level. So the recommendations that were made were to authorise a constitution for a Bexhill marketing group. This is something that we've seen succeed quite well in Battle and has really worked for that community, and therefore it was considered maybe this might be an opportunity to introduce something similar for Bexhill. That marketing group should be funded to the tune of the £9,000 a year that's currently earmarked for the events that are held in Bexhill. We also made recommendations in regard to the events funding that had not been spent in 2021 due to the COVID pandemic. So that was £9,000 for Bexhill. We advised to carry over, and having been approached by the Rye Bay Marketing Limited, to potentially as an option to offer them the £9,000 that wasn't spent on Rye events for part of their 2021 campaign. Having considered that, those recommendations, overview and scrutiny approved, following some extensive debate, recommendations 1, 2 and 3, but decided against recommending to Cabinet that £9,000 be allocated towards the Rye Bay Marketing Limited for their 2021 campaign. Following the discussions that were held at overview and scrutiny, myself and other officers had a number of long discussions with the portfolio holder for tourism, on the basis that, having taken on board the points that were made by overview and scrutiny, it was felt that actually maybe we wanted to come forward with a different set of recommendations for Cabinet to consider. The key ones being that the constitution of a Bexhill marketing group be deferred for a couple of years until a new town council in Bexhill is established, which gives the proper political infrastructure to see that to see any sort of local marketing group succeed, gives it the right funding and the right local support. We've also been approached by a director of the Light Up Bexhill Christmas lights, as in recommendation number 2, for some additional funding for those festivities, given the fact that there was no events in Bexhill over the summer period, and the effects of COVID have meant had some significant impacts on local retailers. The remaining events funding for Bexhill Rye and the rural areas that hasn't been allocated, we are recommending to be carried forward to 2021-22 to be spent on events, additional events for next year, to help with the recovery in the tourism industry locally. I'm happy to pass it out to members for further comment or questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Ben, and I think it's very encouraging that the comments and the discussions that took place at scrutiny have come forward, and we've revisited them. So I think that was an important piece of work by scrutiny members, and thank you for that. Councillor Timpey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Redeclare interest in 7.2. I'd like to just reiterate what you just said about the considered judgments and advice from overview and scrutiny. It was very, very valuable, and we had a lot of discussion, and I think we've made the right decision to defer to the Town Council. It's a local issue, and they should be the ones that decide whether they want to follow this type of format or whether they want to do something different. So I'd like to move that we do actually accept 7.1, 7.3 and 7.4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hazel. Councillor Paul Osborne. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, yeah, just to sort of back up what Ben said with regard to this item and the discussion we had at scrutiny. We did have a fairly long discussion, I think probably about 40 minutes, if not more, going round and round in circles trying to come up with something. I see your sort of recommendation now is somewhat different to what we come up with, but then that's what democracy is. My only concern would be over the years of being sort of not so much involved, but listening to and hearing from tourism groups. You know, I can see your point about the funding on item 1 to go to a Bexhill Town Council. That's fine. That's sensible. But any group will sort of tell you that if you're going to sort of start marketing for next year, you need to be starting that sort of almost now. You know, immediately after Christmas, to get the summer sort of trade coming in, if there will be any summer trade next year, who knows. So I would be concerned there that you might have a gap unless, you know, 1066 marketing fill that void, if you like, for Bexhill for next year and possibly the year after. I would also sort of just that sort of any sort of a layman, if you like, sort of from Rye especially, reading this recommendation would just see that all the money from Rye is being spent in Bexhill Christmas lights and Sidley Christmas lights. So I know that's not the case, but you know, if a sort of a layman sort of just quickly pick this up somewhere and read it, they probably fall off their perch. But there it is. But no, I just thought I'd say about the marketing for Bexhill. Obviously, that something needs to be happening for next year. And I just wondered where that would happen, because if a town council's sort of formulated in May, they're not going to get a marketing programme ready for summer of next year. And I wouldn't want you to sort of, yeah, the marketing of Bexhill to fall through any cracks, just a thought.
Okay, Paul, thank you for those comments. Hazel, Ben, do you want to just give Paul some reassurance as to what could be happening in Bexhill, assuming that we have a summer season?
If I'm happy to, if portfolio holder will allow me to just confirm really that we will be running an events programme next year. If members go ahead with the recommendations that we presented to them tonight, what we've agreed with the events organisers who'd put in for events this year who didn't receive funding will be automatically allocated the funding for next year. But that will also leave us about £13,500 in additional funding for extra events next year to really help boost that recovery process and try and get people back into the towns, and that includes Bexhill and Rye as well. So Rye won't miss out on in that regard. They will still have additional funding for their events next year as well.
Thank you for that, Ben. Hazel, did you want to add anything to that, or does that cover off where we are?
That pretty much covers it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Does that give you some reassurance, Paul? I hope.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it was just we went round and had a big discussion on it, so it's just to make sure that things are covered. That's all.
Very good. Thank you for that, Councillor Terry Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I was really just wanting to endorse what Councillor Osborne says. I think it's very important that we don't, just because we're changing the way in which we're going to set up the conditions for the marketing group, it's vital that we don't let the marketing of Bexhill sort of drift for a while. And I'm sure that we will be talking to 1066 Country, anybody else countywide who's to do with marketing or has an interest in marketing Bexhill. I'm sure we will be all over those. And really all I want to do then, if we finish the debate, is to second the proposals that Councillor Timpey has made in items 1, 3 and 4.
Thank you for that, Terry. No further points being raised. So, Julie, can we please vote on those items 1, 3 and 4 in agenda item 7, please?
Yes, Chairman. So again, I'll call your names in alphabetical order. So it's for, against or abstain. Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Brereton.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julie. So Councillor Bayliss, Byrne and Timpey will now leave this meeting. And how long it takes you to go. And Councillor Drayson, Brian?
Likewise, Chair, although I'm not a member of Cabinet, I also have an interest and I will leave as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move item 2 of the recommendations as printed. Normally, I wouldn't be in favour of this, but obviously this year is a completely different year. And again, with what's happened in the last few days, with a further lockdown going into December, the prospects for any sort of normal Christmas have diminished really to nothing. And there is going to be very few things to look forward to. So I think a decent light display in Bexhill is absolutely imperative to lift spirits, try and get some sort of normality back. And I think it's an excellent use of the unspent money. Certain individuals in Bexhill have put their hands in their pockets, in very deep pockets, in previous years. That wasn't going to happen again this year. So this continues the lighting in Bexhill, and hopefully next year, with things are a bit back to normal, funding can be found from elsewhere in the community and the business. But apart from that, I'd like to call on Councillor Vinehall to second, please.
Thank you, Kevin. Jonathan?
Thank you. Yes, I concur with everything you said, Councillor Dixon, and I second that.
Thank you. Ben, you would like to add some comments to this report?
It was just merely to say, Chairman, that obviously given the announcement by government with regards to the lockdown, that that given the recommendation that's coming forward, we'll continue to have conversations with Light Up Bexhill and the other Christmas displays about how best we can support them in making sure that the town centres remain accessible, and regardless of what the government decisions are in terms of extending lockdown and so on and so forth. So it was more just about that. We'll continue to have discussions with the groups that are providing these displays.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, for the work you put in on this. Yeah, I think we have a situation that we do have a duty to try and maintain morale or raise morale. It's going to be a difficult time ahead. It's going to be dark. It's going to be gloomy. And if we can also give the retail outlets in our towns that opportunity of encouraging in the right way visitors into the town, residents into the town to spend locally. So this is on a one-off basis. And thank you for your support. If we can go to a vote on this, Julie, that's item 2.
Okay, I will call your names in alphabetical order again. So for, against, or abstain. So Councillor Brewerton.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. You'll let the others back in the door, will you, somehow?
Yes, bear with us a moment, Chair.
Thank you. Are we all back together?
Not quite. I'm just trying to call Councillor Bayliss back in. Just bear with me one moment.
Thank you.
Hello, successfully rejoined, I think.
I'm just waiting on Councillor Bayliss at the moment. They're all back in now, Chairman.
Jolly good. Okay. Thank you, Julie. And that was approved for those that were out of the room. If we can move on to agenda item 8. This is a proposal to propose a set of revised fees and charges for a range of services provided by the council. If I can invite Joe Powell to present this report, that's agenda item 8. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I'll read through the report. The recommendations are to approve the various amended charges, and there's another last recommendation that I'll come on to at the end. The report recommends a set of fees and charges for a range of services provided by the council. In most cases, the charges and the changes recommended are in line with RPI, which is at 0.5%, there will be some exceptions to that, however, which I'll run through for you just to summarise. I think it's important to remind members at the outset that failure to achieve sufficient income can compromise our ability, obviously, to sustain statutory services, and savings may need to be found from elsewhere within the budget. So an important piece of work in many ways. So the first one is the beach and foreshore and the provision of beach huts, which are obviously a very popular amenity item, and we've made the decision therefore to still make a modest increase, but one outside of RPI of 1.7% of £9 on an annual fee of 530, and it's recommended that the charges for seasonal tent sites also increase at the same percentage, 1.7%. Moving on to car parking. Members will be aware that Overview and Scrutiny recently approved the formation of a task and finish group, which met latterly last Friday for the first time, and they will be considering the impact of CPE on off-street car parking, and it's therefore recommended that our charges remain in abeyance until that group can recommend back to Overview and Scrutiny in April, and then on to Cabinet if needed, if any changes are indeed recommended. There is one exception to that, and that's in regards to Camber Western and Camber car parks generally. The cost of Camber Western have risen significantly following police advice around antisocial behaviour and the need for extra security on that site in the summer seasons. So we are proposing to increase the charges there from £5 to £6 if you're parking for 1 to 3 hours, from £10 to £12 if you're parking for 3 to 6 hours, and from £12 to £15 if you're parking for the day. Next is the bulky waste collections, and that's being increased by a couple of pounds up to £40. An important charge, that one, to get right, because if we make it too high, it increases fly tipping. So we need to sort of approach with caution on that one, which is why it's a modest increase. Garden waste collections is one to focus on for you. As members will be aware from this report coming forward every year, pretty much it's a recurring conversation. The total cost of the service is approximately £930,000, and our current subscription price of £40 per annum achieves about £140,000 gap in that income and cost comparison. So we're recommending an increase to £45 per annum, which would still leave a small deficit to the council of £40,000, but while minimising the risk of detracting from new subscribers and not making the increase too significant in that regard. There's another thing to mention in terms of new subscribers. The way that the BIFA contract operates is that we're the cost to us of garden waste collections is put into tiers, and the present tier we're in is more expensive per collection than if we enter into the next tier above us, which is a higher quantum of subscribers. So the magic number is 20,000 subscribers, and that gets us into a significantly cheaper per collection tier. We're presently hovering around 19,600 subscribers, so there's a 400 subscriber gap. So that brings me on to the recommendation of the report that delegated authority be given to the head of service of housing and community in consultation with portfolio holder for finance and performance management to look at incentive schemes to try and incentivise new subscribers to take us above that 20,000 figure, and there's an action plan in place, and we're looking at a range of options to that end. And it might be helpful just to highlight that in Hastings the subscription fee is £70 for garden waste, in Eastbourne it's £52, Lewes 70, Wealdon 50. So at 45 we would be still the cheapest in East Sussex, or the most affordable in East Sussex. But again, we need to make sure that we keep our attracting the level of subscribers that we need. We feel the risk of detracting at that rise is low. And happy to take questions on those points or any other part of the report.
Thank you very much, Joe, for the work that's gone into this. It's quite a significant amount of work, I know, and the points that you've discussed with the portfolio lead on this, Councillor Brewerton. Are there any questions? I can't see there's any questions. Councillor Brian Drayson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have emailed Mr. Powell on these. It's a shame we can't have some format of discussing them all before we come to a public meeting, because we increasing some by 25p just to stay within the 0.5% and others by £9 to an awkward figure seems weird. But I've got one specific question. I'd like to know, and I declare an interest here being involved with Bexhill United Football Club. Why is a football ground £2 dearer than a cricket ground when it's the same format? And could we not look again at the charge of closing the gates? Because we're putting that by all of 25p, I think, from 47 to 47.25. And it seems if you're going to put it up, you might as well put it up to 50. But why the difference in cricket and football, please, Jeff?
I don't want to get into two sides of cricket football debate, but well, yeah, I think the challenge there is that the costs, I suppose, of those different sites will be different, and it's a question of trying to meet the costs of operating various facilities across the various services across the piece, and so that would be one where they're trying to pitch it at where the cost sits. So that's the rationale that's applied. So.
Thank you, Chair. The point was, I think we could all sit down and individually discuss these, and it'd be nice to discuss these before a sort of meeting and argue them somewhere through audit or through overview and scrutiny, rather than picking them off. And are we allowed to make suggestions about the incentive scheme for the garden waste, please?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Welcome. Yeah, very welcome. Yeah, and I would say that the reason for RPI being applied is a resource issue, really, in the case of needing to apply a process across the board that's efficient and effective. And it's obviously a cumulative effect if we don't increase by the 25p, which I know does seem slightly ludicrous in this year, but that's a cumulative impact of that over years and decades will mean that we're becoming very far away from the actual cost. So there's that reason. But yeah, I mean, like anything, like the car park fees, for example, these things are worth a review every now and again, and it might be that it's something to be sort of looked at in around a bit more in coming years.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Terry Byrne, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I raised this with Joe in a conversation we had earlier on the green bins. The raising of the charge from 40 to 45. 45 is so close to being perceived as £1 a week that I think 50 would go down just as well with our subscribers. As I say, that figure of £1 a week is roughly what anyone would consider when faced with a 40 or 45. So I just think it would be so much. I don't think it'd be a problem to sell to the public the fact that their green bins are going to cost them £1 a week.
I think you mean the brown bins.
Sorry, the brown bins. Sorry, the brown bins will cost them. Yeah, indeed.
All right. Right, there's a hand up before I ask Councillor Brewerton, who's got a hand up. Yeah. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to explore a little bit the issue of the bulky waste charges, because it's over the years it's been something that I think it's one of those crimes. Environmental crimes, as we all know, are appalling, and the spectre of fly tipping, especially in the rural areas, is something that we as councillors are dealing with in our caseload on I'm glad to say, not on a daily basis, but certainly there are regular incidences, and obviously in terms of when one talks about whether there's going to be an increase in fly tipping or whether there isn't, and in obviously the types of fly tip. I mean, clearly the worst type of fly tip we can ever see are things like asbestos, where you've got some very dubious contractors who are frankly causing a major environmental crime. But in terms of those smaller fly tips, those ones that, for example, aren't garden waste, again by contractors that are unscrupulous, what would be interesting to know would be the average cost to clear a fly tip and the revenue that we create in total by, in particular, the up to 3 items charges, because what I'm frankly concerned about is to whether or not that charge is actually justified at all in terms of avoiding fly tips, because I think that in terms of clearing up a fly tip, the cost is clearly significantly greater than that charge, the previous charge of £38 or the proposed one of 40. Because I know that when we, as particularly as rural councils drive around, if we counted up how many sofas we see every year, and if we take those as individual fly tips, then it would seem to me that then there is genuine reason for, and it's not frivolous, to carry out a piece of work that looked very carefully at the type of fly tip and whether, in terms to avoid fly tipping, it is essentially, you tend to get 3 types of fly tip, don't you? It's either the garden waste that an unscrupulous contractor has dumped, the serious environmental crime that I've alluded to, but it is, we seem to get beds and sofas alarmingly often in lay-bys, get field gates, etc., etc. And I just wonder, it would be really interesting to know, as I say, the cost to clear an average fly tip and what we actually receive in revenue in a year total. Because my suggestion would be, if it in fact doesn't create a lot of revenue, that if this council went out and said to residents up to 3 items FOC, actually whether we'd see a significant reduction in some of those casual fly tips. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Joe, is there some comment? Would you like to come back?
Yeah, I mean, I can help with some of the information. It might be helpful to as Councillor Maynard says, to look at it in the round. But the way the contract works, the collection of bulky waste items is no longer a core cost, so it's an additional cost. So it's a case of us trying to meet that cost to the contractor, and it costs us approximately £70 to collect a fly tip. That's again, it's a non-core cost item, so it's an extra cost. But absolutely, I'm very keen to come down on this as hard as we can, because it's one of the areas of enforcement that we do have, and it's a huge problem, a huge eyesore. I would add to Councillor Maynard's point on rural areas is the bring sites in urban areas as well, which are, you know, real victims to this. And yeah, I'm very keen to do as Councillor Maynard mentions. That would be a useful piece of work.
Yeah, and good point brought forward, and thank you, Carl, for that. And Joe, I'll leave that with you then to look at. I think there's Councillor Cortell would like to make an observation.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to apologise if I'm covering something that's already been covered, because I lost connectivity for the first 20 minutes of this debate. So I have no idea what's been covered so far. My point is about Appendix 4 on the car park permits. I wonder whether, as it's being looked at in considerable detail by a task and finish group, whether the decision on the proposed charges for 21-22 should be deferred until the task and finish group on car parking has managed to review this.
Joe, can you just sort of update from what came out of the Task and Finish group meeting, which I think took place last Friday?
Sorry, excuse me.
You still can't hear you, Joe.
Sorry, excuse me. There we go. Success. Yeah, no, that's something we can certainly look at. I mean, the Task and Finish group are looking at that. The amendment in Appendix 4 is in line with what was brought forward as part of a separate cabinet report. I'm trying to get to the Appendix 4 so I can look at the detail on that. But if I can take that away and discuss it perhaps offline. My understanding is that the Appendix 4, the car park fees are referring to, on the permits, are referring to decisions that have been made in the previous cabinet approval. So it would mean looking at those again.
Okay.
Is that clear? I suppose.
I'm afraid, Chair. Sorry.
I suppose it would be helpful if could you draw my attention to the piece of Appendix 4 you mentioned specifically?
Yes, sure. There are a number of car parks listed, including Camber Sands, and where I would personally argue, and I intend to argue it within the Task and Finish group, that possibly the charges could go higher. And on the other hand, there are some car parks in Bexhill where I plan to argue in the Task and Finish group that the charges could be reduced. And I feel that just to increase everything by a percentage for inflation doesn't really resolve what we're trying to look at in careful detail at the Task and Finish group. I'm looking at page 42 of the.
Yeah, no, I'm with you now. Yeah, that's fine. Look, I think it's really for members to decide. We've applied again the rationale of 0.5% in RPI without necessarily going through, every line. It is true to say that we will be reviewing in the round car parking fees as part of the task and finish group recommendation. I mean, the increases are extremely modest. We're talking a few pounds on each. So I don't think it will make a significant. There won't be an impact, indeed, on revenue in 21-22 because the recommendations will be coming forward, as Councillor Cortez says. The only exception to that would be Canberra car parks, which have a bit, as I highlighted in the report, do have a more significant increase. And I'm not sure of what the harm would be of increasing it now and then revising it later. To be completely honest, given that they're so modest.
If I can, before asking Councillor Jay Brewerton to move this report, there's Councillor Coleman and then Councillor Byrne. You're going to make some questions of Joe here on this, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, just very quickly. First of all, I just want to make a very rare statement that I agree with Councillor Maynard. In terms of fly tipping, it's been a real issue in Sidley as well. I was wondering on that subject whether within our sort of publicity on social media and such, discouraging people from fly tipping, we could actually mention the cost of each collection, because I think when you say it costs 70 quid for each collection roughly, that I think sends alarm bells through people's heads and it might discourage them a little bit more.
Thank you for those comments, Sam. And Councillor Terry Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to comment on fly tipping as well. And yes, I also agree with Councillor Maynard. However, sadly, I feel there's not a one-to-one correlation between charging and fly tipping. So to get rid of the charges, I don't think gets rid of fly tipping. And the reason it's things like sofas and couches and beds is it's usually when people move out of a flat. And people will not take the time to organise themselves and book a pickup time of bulky waste. So sadly, we're still going to have, no matter what, we could abolish the charges completely, and we'd still be saddled with the cost of clearing up fly tipping. So it's probably a bit more of a balancing act between charging fees and ameliorating the cost of fly tipping. So I have a horrible feeling we could just cancel the cost of bulky waste, but really not make any great inroads into fly tipping. It's just my personal observation.
Okay. Well, thanks for your personal observation, Terry. If I can invite Councillor Brewerton to move this report and make any comments that she would wish to do so. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. I would like to agree with Councillor Coleman and Councillor Maynard. What's absolutely astonished me working so closely with the Coombe Valley is just how many people tend to fly tip just 10 metres away from the tip, the rubbish tip. It's astonishing. You get sometimes a big line of it all the way down the road, or in the car park there, or in the car park by the actual nursery, so Blackbrook. So I do think we need to do something more positive about fly tipping. I want to reassure Councillor Drayson just how hard we gave Joe Powell a very hard time debating this report and debating what charges we could increase or decrease. And he and his team have done an absolutely thorough, sterling job investigating what all the other authorities are charging for each of these individual things. So I do want to assure you we did have a very intensive debate over charges. I would like to move this report, and I would like to ask Councillor Christine Bayliss if she would second this report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's two more comments. Thank you, Christine. Did I hear you come to second that?
I seconded, yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. There are two members who'd like to make observations here. Councillor Jeanette Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a comment. At the opposite, people don't want to pay for bulk waste, and this is dump it. They think it's too expensive. It's not, but in their eyes, it's expensive. So they'd rather throw it away and let someone else deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment about garden waste collections. We did make a pledge last year that we would increase it to £45 this year, so I think that's what we should do. And looking at the report, it does make a loss at the moment, this service, and in our present financial situation, that isn't a good thing. However, I think the way we're going about this to rectify this and bring the service to break even, or even make a very small surplus, is to get to that magic 20,000 subscribers with an incentive scheme. Some great ideas I know that Joe and Deborah have got already. We will be pushing that, and again, a plea to all councillors is that if we can just get another 400, that would make a lot of difference to the council. So it's not much to ask, and really, as we've already discussed, £45 isn't a lot of money, particularly when you compare it to our neighbours. So yeah, we will look forward to for next year's incentive schemes.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We've had the report moved and seconded. Julia, can I ask you to take a vote on this, please?
Okay, councillors, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. So it's for, against, or abstain. Councillor Bayliss. For. Councillor Wilson.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall. Councillor Vinehall. He's obviously lost connection at the moment.
Yes,
So
thank you very much. Yes, for.
okay, thank you, Councillor. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. I trust everyone's comfortable at this moment in time. Shall we just push on, or did anybody want a couple of minutes to? Nope. So let's just push on to agenda item 9. This is the Burwash Neighbourhood Plan Rother District Council representations to the Regulation 16 consultation. I believe there is a situation here, Jonathan, where I believe you are going to make some comments and propose an amendment to this report.
Yes, I am. And I know that probably Councillor Barnes and Councillor Kirby-Green probably want to make some comments too. Whether what I say changes their mind or not, that's fine. This has been a very tricky neighbourhood plan. And there has been some problems in that the neighbourhood plan group in November 2018 had a meeting at which a couple of our members attended, at least one of our members attended, with a council officer. And at that meeting, the officer was told that they were going to not allocate housing in their neighbourhood plan. I appreciate a lot of what I'm saying probably won't be understood by a number of members, and I apologise for that, and happy to clarify if anything I say is too much too technical or too gobbledygook sounding. That was fine to have that discussion, but that was not exactly what you do or how you tell your local, your planning authority that you're going to make a very fundamental change in your plan. And so time moved on, and there was other correspondence about this from their consultant, but that was neither here nor there. And we then got to the DASA examination, and of course the DASA, wasn't just invented overnight. It took some long time to produce. And the DASA said that the Burwash Neighbourhood Plan would allocate sites. Now, the implication of this is that you have to be allocating sites either in one plan or the other, not least which, because that goes towards how you count your 5-year supply. So not allocating the sites has an impact on our 5-year supply of housing. I should point out at this stage that what we're talking about here is a quantum of 22 dwellings. The full neighbourhood, the full plan would need to account for some 54, I think it is something like that, just over 50 houses. But of course, there are outline planning permissions in Burwash covering the difference between the full number and the 22 required. I have to say that the sites that are that have that planning permission are not popular sites, and ones that have had planning permissions refused on, but that doesn't make them any less effective in terms of a site which has been given permission. It is nearly impossible to remove permission from a site. So we now have 2 consultations which are done by a neighbourhood plan group. One is called Regulation 14, and that happened about late May through to July last year. And that was done after the DASA was examined, which that examination completed in May. So there's the problem. We have 2 plans, neither of which account for the houses. Now, during the course of the last year, officers and members, including Sue Prochak and myself, have tried to work to resolve the situation because there was an error, and it wasn't seeming that this error was going to be resolved. So what is the problem, and what can we do about it? Well, the problem is that if we go ahead with this response as is, we're basically telling the examiner that the plan should fail because it doesn't meet something called the basic conditions, and I won't go into a detailed explanation of that, but that wouldn't be a good thing. The officers have put together the consultation response, which you read here, and they have done absolutely perfect job. It's technically absolutely correct. There is nothing wrong with what they have said in this. And I'm going to make a recommendation in a minute, which covers off the parts that should go ahead tonight, and then another part which just needs a little bit more work. So what we have is a situation where there was a lack of proper formal communication between the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, the Parish Council, and Rother District Council officers in that period of time. That doesn't really mean that there wasn't communication, and there is really a responsibility by all those concerned, those 3 groups, whether they be officers or committee, for that unfortunate lack of formal communication. And it is important to understand that in these sort of planning documents, you do have to have formal communication at certain points in time. So, for example, what should have happened was that the steering group should have asked the Parish Council to have a resolution to change the plan from one that allocated houses to one that didn't, and the clerk should have then communicated. None of that happened, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have some understanding of the fact that they were planning or wanted to make this change. So what that is all about is human error, and unfortunately this administration has inherited that error. It also has inherited the fact that, quite frankly, and I can speak from personal experience, so I won't be criticised on this fact, that the general attitude by the last administration, which was fed through 2 officers, was a very poor attitude towards neighbourhood and very poor support. So that is most unfortunate. We don't want, and there is no value to anybody in having a neighbourhood plan fail at examination or fail at referendum. There is no value whatsoever for anyone concerned. There has only been about 4 plans that have actually failed, 4 or 5, I can't remember the exact number today, failed at referendum across the country out of about 1,000 plans, and I don't think we want to be one of those few. So we need to find a way through this. We certainly don't want the Burwash neighbourhood plan to fail the basic condition test, which is the critical test. And I will be proposing with officers, and we had some discussions today as to how we might manage that through this consultation process. Yes, we do want to make a consultation response, because that ensures that should there be a hearing, we will be a party to that hearing. Yes, the items in Appendix 1, sorry, items 20 to 22 are all valid responses, and they are really all responses which were also dealt with at Regulation 14, and either the neighbourhood plan hasn't taken them up as they should have done, or they haven't taken them up as well as they should have done, and that's important. I've read through them all, and I would agree with everything they've said, and I have read hundreds of neighbourhood plans and looked at hundreds of examinations. So I think I'm sufficiently experienced to know that they look good and valid and should be taken up, and the examiner would be looking at them, and the examiner would be expecting us as a local authority to make those comments. This administration has seen the appointment of a highly experienced neighbourhood plan officer, and with that officer will avoid this sort of problem in the future. I believe our administration is committed to a significantly improved approach to nurturing and supporting emerging neighbourhood plans and the parishes that do them. This is critical. It is actually a much faster and more effective way of getting site allocations. So on that basis, I'm going to recommend the following: that the comments in Appendix 1, 20 to 22 of the report are submitted with the supporting material for consideration by the examiner. And while comments 1 relate to the basic conditions, that should be deferred for myself and in consultation with officers, including the head of planning, to consider the views of the Burwash Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group. They wrote to the Cabinet on the weekend, consider the comments that they've made and submit a revised comment to replace comment 1, and this will all be done and submitted by the 6th of November. So part of the recommendation is that these are all submitted by the 6th of November, and also that the second recommendation on this agenda item be accepted as well. So I know that was a rather long statement, but hopefully it's sufficiently clear to either generate questions or to receive a second that we can move on.
Right. Thanks very much for that, Jonathan. That's quite a lot of technical information there, and I think some of us have stayed in touch with it. Others may not have done. Eleanor, Councillor Eleanor Kirby-Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope you'll bear with me because I too would like to speak for a while. I think that this is obviously very important to Burwash. First of all, I'd like to say I take exception to Councillor Bindhall's politicising this. Councillor Barnes and I have worked extremely closely with Burwash. I am a supporter of neighbourhood plans, as is Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes has worked with a number of other parishes on their plans. From day one, I've supported Burwash in this, and I am very disappointed at the lack of support the authority has given Burwash over the past few years, and I have been constantly requesting more help. I've been involved all the way through, and it is not a party political issue. I have to say the authority's response has been pretty poor, but I don't believe that that's a Conservative versus independent issue. I think it is a inbuilt issue within the planning department, if I'm honest. And I think that anyway, I just want to say that I think that's really disappointing to bring party politics into this, because I'm certainly not bringing party politics into this, and the group in Burwash are particularly apolitical, and it's not a party political matter. The community of Burwash is not anti-housing. Reading this and the discussions we've had with the planners over the last 3-4 years, we're not anti-housing. We want the right houses in the right places. Burwash, in fact, was one of the first parish councils to actually get an exception site. We basically delivered 10 passive house units. That, of course, didn't count towards the housing target, as also a number of small-scale developments haven't counted over the past years either. The community of Burwash actually supported the most recent application in Burwash for 9 houses. The community of Burwash and the parish council and the district council supported, but it was recommended for refusal by planning officers. So we are not anti-housing. Burwash, given its rich setting and topography, is not suited to large-scale development. In the report, officers make much of the Amber Schlar site on Shrub Lane. However, this site was turned down by the planning committee, and the refusal was actually proposed by the current deputy leader of the council, Councillor Project, for the right reasons. And the appeal was then withdrawn by the applicant, stating the fear that protections offered to the AONB would prevail. And it's unclear now, when the officers are trying to suggest there should be 30 houses, how that is not going to also affect the AONB. Councillor Bynhall has referred to the cock-up, sort of the problems en route. I was going to say that this suggesting that there's some surprise that the report doesn't contain housing numbers is, I'm afraid, disingenuous. I was at the meeting on the 5th of November 2018, and it was actually an officer, after going round and round and round the houses, which we've done on many occasions to try and find sites in Burwash, it was actually an officer that turned around to us and said, "You could always do the plan without numbers, you know." And we all sat there and said, "Oh, can we? Oh, a neighbourhood plan doesn't need to have numbers in it." And that's when we left that meeting and said, "Great, we won't be putting numbers in." So I think for the officers to say it wasn't done officially, you know, at no point in time was there a communication to Burwash's neighbourhood planning team or the parish council saying, "You officially need to let us know by the parish clerk." In fact, as Councillor Bynhall referred to, RDC wrote to the planning consultant just before the DASA hearing to ask for an update. And she put in writing, Burwash is the only plan not allocating sites. So our consultant told Rother planning officers prior to the DASA hearing that there wasn't going to be housing. So yes, it wasn't communicated by the parish clerk, but at no point did anyone turn around and say, "Oh, thank you for that. You need to tell us via the parish clerk." Because if we'd known that, you know, these are, you know, not professionals doing this plan. They do need help and support. And I feel that, you know, really that hasn't been there. In fact, the consultant last week sent an email saying that the plan is in general conformity with the strategic policies. So this is where I'm confused, because either she, as an expert in this area, or rather has to be correct. They can't both be correct. To take a few examples of the material content, though, which obviously isn't, Councillor Bynhall doesn't think is up for discussion. Point 20 reads, information regarding population size, demographics, etc., would all help create a sense of place for the reader and decision maker. That is all contained in the very detailed and extensive infrastructure assessment. Point 22 refers to the lack of parish photographs. Point 3 also says that the draft plan does not take the opportunity to add any parish-specific elements to policies, etc. But both of those are contained in the environment assessment. And interestingly, although the environment assessment is actually available to view on the RDC website, it's not listed in this report anywhere under point 4 with documents. It's not actually listed. So it does beg the question, has that document actually been read? Point 5 notes that there are no other dark skies policies in made neighbourhood plans in Rother District, but we don't think that's a reason not to include one. Burwash clearly doesn't have an international dark skies reserve status, as does the South Downs National Park, which has been the response. But Burwash and neighbouring parishes are working with the Highwood unit to assist in their dark skies project. And interestingly, RDC's DASA, adopted 12/2019, does include a policy on dark skies. So it's all these inconsistencies throughout this report which reinforces the view of Burwash residents that RDC's planning department are out to undermine the neighbourhood plan because of this decision that was taken not to include housing. And I really do feel that even though they were told it wasn't going to include housing, everyone just hoped that over the next year or two, Burwash would be bullied into putting housing in place. And we're now at the situation where they've stood firm and said we're not going to include housing. And that's where we've got to this situation. You know, there's no template for neighbourhood plans. They're meant to emerge from the community with guidance from a consultant. And Burwash Neighbourhood Planning Team and I feel that the plan doesn't miss any of the research and background required. RDC, as Councillor Bynhall has admitted, did know about the lack of housing 2 years ago. So I don't think that, on the one hand, I'm pleased with the comments regarding the conformity regarding the numbers, but I still think that a lot of the comments in here regarding the information that's missing, it may not be stylistically like Rother wants it, but I don't think it's actually lacking that information. So I would ask officers to, I would ask Cabinet to request officers to amend the overall representation. And I'm sure Councillor, thank you for your time, and I'm sure Councillor Barnes would like to add some comments.
Before I invite Councillor Barnes, Jonathan, Tim Hickling has indicated.
Yeah, let Tim speak too.
I would like to Tim, as service manager, to make comments on this. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I thought I'd just do a brief introduction following Councillor Vinehall's introduction in terms of amending the recommendation. So this report before you is presenting Rother's comments as amended by Councillor Vinehall's revised recommendation on the Burwash Neighbourhood Plan, Regulation 16 consultation, which runs for 8 weeks and ends at 4:30 on Friday. And as we know, due to time constraints in the consultation, the chairman has agreed that this report is presented as an urgent item. So the next stage is for Burwash and Rother to jointly agree to appoint an independent examiner who will consider these comments along with all the other representations received during the consultation. And it's just so that members are fully aware, this is a full consultation, which Rother aren't the only consultee. So the examiner will determine whether the plan meets the basic conditions. It's not for your officers or for Rother District Council to make that call, and recommend whether the plan can proceed to referendum. So the suggested comments are set out in the attached appendix. Comments 2 when you said, I think you said 20, just clarification, do you mean comments 2 to 22 as the comments to go forward? Is it?
22, yes.
Yes. So comments 2 to 22 highlight comments related to the specific policies in the neighbourhood plan, one of which was Councillor Kirby-Green's referred to the dark skies policy. But some of those policies, we take a view that they simply repeat national or existing local policies. Now, commentary on these particular policies, if you like, aren't deal breakers in terms of making the neighbourhood plan. And as I said, it's up to an examiner who he may want to modify some of them policies in what they call minor or main modifications through the examination. So it's recommended that the comments go forward. Are supported, therefore it is recommended that these comments 2 to 22 in the appendix are submitted with supporting material for consideration by the examiner, whilst comments 1 relating to the basic conditions are deferred by Cabinet, as Councillor Vinehall has said, so the Cabinet lead on planning, in consultation with your officers, to consider the views of the Burwash Neighbourhood Steering Group contained in their letter that I received this morning. And the second recommendation is that the Chief Executive be authorised to consider any modifications that may be raised through the examination to secure the neighbourhood plan to be in general conformity with the adopted core strategy and the development and site allocations plan. So that was my brief introduction, Chairman. So I don't know whether you want to ask Councillor Vinehall to add to that at all?
Yeah, sure. No, Chairman, are you happy for me to?
Yes, please, Jonathan, go ahead.
Councillor Kirby-Green, thank you very much. I wish you had been my member and John Barnes as well when we were doing our neighbourhood plan, because I would have loved to have had somebody fight as hard as you've been fighting for the Burwash plan. We didn't. We had somewhat the opposite of that. And I'm sorry if you feel it's political, but I can assure you the attitude towards neighbourhood plans is about 180 degrees different with this administration versus the previous administration. Take that and do with it what you would like. The point is that we will seek to find a way to communicate to the examiner that we wish the problem of this housing allocation or not allocation, or what was said or what wasn't said, not impact on his decision to determine whether it meets the basic conditions. That sounds a little convoluted, but it is quite a tricky thing that we will need to be doing. I don't really want to go into each consultation response, but I will tell you about the dark skies. And I did have a conversation with the AO and B group on Friday, I think, and we discussed that particular policy. And what they haven't done is actually produce the appropriate evidence for that policy. You know, you just can't say with like a dark skies policy, you actually have to produce evidence, and that has not happened. That doesn't mean there couldn't be a form of dark skies policy, but just not the one that's been written up. I can assure you that an examiner does not like poorly written plans where they have to modify and take things out. I know that, I've seen it, I've experienced it myself. Things like repeating national and local policies is an inappropriate thing to do. A neighbourhood plan has to be able to be used by development managers to make decisions on planning applications, and there are quite a number of areas through the existing plan where that it doesn't happen. It's, you know, the policies or the way they're written or the supporting document would make it ambiguous in some cases and problematic for a development manager, and you could be assured that the examiner will pick those things up. So it's best to try and go to an examination with those things done. Now, I will say some things that I weren't going to say, but I will say them because you brought them up. A neighbourhood plan, particularly where you have an issue, should have a health check before it's submitted, and that's where it goes to another examiner, and it's done, you know, it's paid for with a grant, and they vet it before it's submitted. I recommended this. It was recommended at the Regulation 14, and the Burridge Plan Group didn't do it. Now, that's really a very naive thing not to do that. The plan was submitted in August. It failed to include a basic conditions statement, which is the very simplest thing that any neighbourhood plan would know that you have to do. And it took us 3 weeks as an authority to get those from the neighbourhood plan group. The plan, I understand, was not shown to their consultant before it was submitted. That is not very good. You rely on that professional to help you. You commented on why didn't the officer tell us we had to do this in a formal sense. I think the officer probably should have said something, and I think somewhere along the way somebody should have said something, but at the same time the professional advisor should have told the neighbourhood plan group. That's what they are there for. My take of this is that I don't particularly want to be the one who's involved in he said, she said, because I wasn't there, yeah, and you weren't there in all the discussions, and nor was anyone that is about now. So the best thing to do is to try and find a way, which I will do with the officers. You know, we've already had some discussions about the general concept of expressing to the examiner that we do not want this plan to fail because of the lack of allocation, and that is largely driven by the fact that it is the number of houses, which is 22, that aren't allocated, is really not material. What we have to be sure is that this is not, this doesn't become any sort of precedent for anyone else doing neighbourhood plans, that they can think that it's okay to do that. So we are going to make it very clear to anyone doing a neighbourhood plan or currently doing one that if they choose to make this extremely fundamental change to their plan, that they need to go through a proper process. And where you have a steering group, which is not as well connected to the parish council as it might be, because often steering groups can be made up of mainly non-parish councillors, there has to be even better communication. So, I take all your points, Eleanor. I think, I support the fact that you've been very supportive, and hopefully we will be able to find a way around to extract this as a comment, which would be a negative comment from the authority, because we want to see this plan at least pass examination and go on to a referendum. And we want to send a message to others who may be wanting to do neighbourhood plans, and I know there are a couple of other villages at the moment, that in the future, and certainly from May last year, we want to nurture these plans. We want to support these plans in a far better way than has happened to date.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for those observations. And obviously there has been several issues in the past, but it's the here and now where we are, and we need to resolve this along those lines. And we have responded to the contact from the Burwash Plan Group, and that's why a significant amount of work has been put in over the last 24 hours on this to try to get to a position where there is a way forward. Councillor Sue Projak, I know you've been involved with this. You want to make a comment, Sue, please?
Well, yes, thank you. I would like to second what Jonathan is suggesting. And also to add, it's such a sad story, a really sad story. And it's like history coming back to bite us, because I can remember when the last local plan, and I was representing Robertsbridge, facing 155 new houses, and arguing about the topography of Robertsbridge. We've got floodplain. Now, I think Burwash has got the worst topography to actually fit in any new housing of any sort of size. And those people, those members who were on the planning committee previously will remember the toxic debates over Strand Meadow and Shrub Lane. We think, how did that 2013, how did they get into the SHLA, into the housing allocation? How did it happen? If anybody had been to any of the, well, particularly the one they call the Watercress Meadow, how did it get in? And I doubt if they're going to be developed, because they won't be viable. Certainly there won't be any affordable houses there. So we have a very, very difficult topography in Burwash, on the ridge there. Neighbourhood plans don't have to allocate sites. Hawkhurst, down the road, they have a neighbourhood plan with no sites allocated. The problem with this one is that allocating sites ran contiguously with the DASA. And so what happened is we had a DASA with no sites and a neighbourhood plan with no sites. If the DASA had been in a different trajectory and a different time, we could have resolved this, because Burwash could have gone ahead without allocating sites once they made that decision. I can totally support Councillor Kirby-Green in the lack of support. I just recognised what she was saying. A lack of support of officers, and it's almost as though they really didn't want our ideas, they wanted their ideas. And it was always this tension throughout doing a neighbourhood plan. And so I'm sorry that the Burwash group have had that kind of tension that has now got to a state where we can't allow it to fail. As Councillor Vinehall says, we don't want to be failing a neighbourhood plan. And I think what we've got is a pragmatic way forward. We can still argue, and I guess the inspector, he or she will argue about the points that Councillor Kirby-Green has made, whether they're in the right section or they've got enough evidence or not. I mean, that's what will happen in the hearing, and the neighbourhood plan group will then have their chance to say what their side of the story is. So I would hope that the Cabinet can support this as a way forward, can draw a line under this, can support we've got a really good qualified new neighbourhood plan officer and we totally support neighbourhood plans. I have done right from the beginning. And now we can actually do something about it and actually nurture our parishes and maybe Bexhill to do neighbourhood plans. So I hope the Cabinet can support what Councillor Vinehall is proposing.
Thank you. Jonathan's proposed it, Sue has seconded it. Councillor John Barnes, you want to make a comment relative to where we are now, John, please?
Yes, please. I'll break my remarks into two halves. I think it's quite sensible that you do take forward tonight some comments to the consultation, but I hope somebody will take a look at those. First of all, you do need to add the environmental assessment, an extremely thorough document that needs actually to be added to the list of documents in front of you. I hope it has been read because it actually is probably one of the better environmental assessments I've seen. I think one or two other wordings there are unfortunate. It depends which, it's very odd actually. I've looked at a lot of the examinations of neighbourhood plans. In one examination, I've seen the examiners recommended that even though the policies duplicate national policies, they should be included. Another examiner did exactly the reverse. So it should be more tentative, I think, than it is in talking about whether repeating national policies is desirable or undesirable. Truth is that as case law builds up on this, we'll find out which of those two examiners was right. But at the moment, it seems safer to the group in Burwash that if they wanted policies, even if they were an elaboration on national policies, they should stay in at the moment. Obviously, we shall see what happens when the examiner looks at it. But by and large, I think the compromise is sensible. That goes forward, is discussed with the examiner. I think we're in a very difficult position. It goes back much further, I think, than even Councillor Vine Hall suggested. It really goes back to the 2005 local plan. It goes back to the decision to nominate only 5 areas as service centres. Bad area in my view, because Burwash Wealden Common has almost all the same facilities other than the school and medical practice that Burwash has. And yet it was allocated no development whatsoever. There are other problems. Why on earth small sites when you're in the High Weald where we have scattered settlements? Small sites of 6 were deemed the minimum to count for a village allocation. Frankly, that meant in Etchingham, a site of 4, part of the benefit that we got from the school didn't count to the Etchingham total. And then there are other problems around exception sites, as Councillor Vine Hall said. Exception sites don't count to a settlement total. And yet the parish council promoted an exception site, 10 sites in Burwash, actually environmentally friendly. They are very advanced. And the neighbourhood plan group there started out with the absolute intention of a call for sites. They assessed sites coming forward, and they found that none were suitable. And anybody who knows Burwash will know where that is the case. It is a ridge valley. It's a ridge settlement. Therefore, any development there is likely to be highly visually intrusive on 2 of the unspoilt river valleys of East Sussex, valleys that are actually key to the landscape of the High Weald. And I agree with Councillor Prochak, quite how either a Strand Meadow, now nicknamed locally Watercress Meadow because that's what it was, with lots of springs, and worse still, the Amber site, which Denton Holmes tried for. The Denton Holmes site should certainly never have been in. It actually sets a very dangerous precedent for the settlement. And I really do hope that that gets removed from this document, because even Denton Holmes themselves didn't press on with the appeal because they reckoned they would lose on AONB grounds. And more inspectors are actually saying that where the High Weald AONB is concerned, you do need to preserve the historic and visually beautiful landscape. So to mention the Denton home site as one that might be tolerable when our own planning committee turned that down flat, and Denton Homes considered an appeal and then wrote to the Burwash Parish Council and said, we're not going ahead because we realised we'd lose on A and B grounds. So please can that go from this document? Now, the last point, and it's probably the most crucial, because Jonathan Feinhall is, I think, talking about administrations. It's not administrations. Planning has never been political in Rother. What has happened, and I welcome it, and I think Jonathan is doing himself insufficient credit, it's a change of planning lead that has altered and a change of approach to neighbourhood plans. Now, there are two things that matter here. You don't actually have to make a ruling at all on the basic point at this time. If you actually lead planning guidance, you don't even have to do that until the inspector has already ruled on the plan itself. So you don't actually need to compromise at this point. What you need to do is to withdraw paragraph 10, and then having withdrawn paragraph 10, everything else goes forward to the examiner. After the examiner has actually ruled, if he raises a point that it doesn't meet the basic test, you can at that point decide, or you can decide for yourself at that point whether it meets the basic test. But you don't have to put that in prior to the end of consultation. I have chapter and verse with me if anybody is going to challenge that. And it's in planning policy guidance. It's also quoted in another area, which is in the letter which was sent to Cabinet. I think Jonathan is trying very hard to arrive at a situation that goes forward, but I think it's unnecessary to put ourselves into this difficulty of trying to resolve what is a extremely difficult situation, which communication has been extremely poor. When you don't actually have to do it by the 6th of November, you can let the process go ahead and you can reserve your position on whether it meets the basic test or not. Frankly, on this one, all the guidance is that you don't have to submit specific sites. What you do have to do to meet the basic test is to agree the total number of houses, and Burwash is perfectly willing to do that. They don't want to say they approve Strand Meadow because they'll lose the consultation referendum. But what they do want to do is to, they'll state very firmly they accept the 52 figure. That means that they have met the basic condition, in my view. But if there's disagreement about that, that can take place after the examiner, because at that point he will decide whether he thinks site allocations should have been made or shouldn't have been made. And I think it's very helpful that Jonathan is trying to be as helpful as possible. So am I. And I think if paragraph 10 goes, we have ongoing discussions. It may well be that other sites can be found if, in fact, we look again in the core strategy at Burwash Wealden Common, where I think there are one or two sites, one of which has got turned down by our officers recently, which seems to me a brownfield site, which we could clearly approve. So I think the target is manageable, but the point is that at this moment, the policy doesn't allocate sites and did not want to, and that was said very firmly to officers back in November 1918, when an officer actually made the suggestion at that meeting that you could go ahead without sites. Now, at that point, it should have been formalized, instead of which we had an ongoing drift, ongoing discussions. And I do agree with Jonathan that in future, we should have a firm guideline document which says what should be done and what shouldn't be done at different stages formally. But on this one, we're in a mess. And what I'd suggest to do is that paragraph 10 is withheld. Further discussions, I'm agreeing with Jonathan really about withholding it, but I think we shouldn't set an unnecessary timetable, because you as an authority don't actually have to apply the basic test at this moment, according to planning guidance.
Thank you very much, John. I think most of us followed that quite clearly. Before I ask Jonathan to sort of probably sum up on this and identify what we're actually going to be asked to vote on, Councillor Catherine Field.
Yes, thank you. I have a comment actually which applies to all these papers, but particularly this item and item 10 and item 12. And it's about the reports themselves rather than the substance. We have at the end of our reports a little grid which asks for comments about how various bits of council policy apply. And in the three ones I've highlighted, against environmental applications, impacts, it says no, no, and no. Well, quite clearly, when it comes to building houses and allocating sites, when it comes to economic recovery and when it comes to car parking, there are huge environmental impacts. And I do think that that particular question deserves rather more consideration in the report than just a no and very occasionally a yes. And I'd like it considered, please.
Thank you very much for bringing that forward, Catherine. Jonathan, are we at a point where we can sum up this sort of debate and get to resolution?
I'll just have a little quick response to John. John, we've had a lot of discussions on this, and I think we generally, agree on the way forward on these things. Unfortunately, the way plans are produced and policies are created, they were voted on, and the core strategy came into place, and you're pretty much stuck with that until you review it and examine the plan. We will have to refer. We don't have to say whether the plan meets the basic condition or not, but we do need to explain why there is two plans, neither of which that allocate sites, and just have an explanation for that, because it would be pretty obvious to the examiner, because the examiner will reference the DASA, I'm sure, and so it would be naive not to do that. It is also a responsibility of a local planning authority to advise or to tell a neighbourhood planning group whether they think their plan is going to meet the basic conditions. It would be pretty negligent not to tell them that and explain why that's the case. That's a responsibility that they really do have. But as I said, we're going to try and figure this out so that we give the plan every chance of succeeding at examination. I don't know what sort of modifications the examiner will make and whether the neighbourhood planning group will be happy with those modifications. We can only wait to see what happens there. But on that basis, I think I read out the recommendations. Do they need to be read again? Julie, did you pick them up? I can email them to you if you like.
Might just be worth reading it out again, Councillor, if you don't mind, just to make sure that everybody is clear.
Okay, I shall do that. You recommend that the comments 2 to 22 in Appendix 1 of this report are submitted with supporting material for consideration by the examiner, while comment 1 relating to the basic conditions be deferred to Cabinet Lead on Planning in consultation with officers to consider the views of the Burwash Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group contained in their letter 31st of October, and submit a revised comment by the 6th of November, and to accept recommendation 2.
Right, that's been moved, that's been seconded. John.
Leader, could I just ask, are the factual amendments going to be made to that, the environmental assessment added?
I don't see where the environmental assessment is missing. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, John.
In the list of what it contained, the environmental assessment isn't mentioned.
Under point 4. Sorry, under point 4.
If that document is missed, then yes, the officers will add that. Okay. I don't know if Tim Hickling wants to comment why that document isn't there, if it was a submitted document.
Sorry, Councillor Barnes, are you referring to the main text of the report or the appendix, which is the comments that we're proposing?
Can I step in there as John's not speaking? We're actually referring to the report, so it's actually not the bits being submitted. But I think the point we were trying to make is that it's not listed under as a document, and we're just concerned that some of your factual comments about information missing, I would have said, and the neighbourhood plan believe is in that report, but you haven't actually listed that report. So we're just concerned that you have actually read that report and taken it into account before you've written.
I think it will have been read. I think it's possibly just a type of oversight in the list of documents, but all the documents are online, and the examiner would receive all the documents because they're packed up together. But I think that that will be.
I'm trying to remember whether it's relevant to Councillor Field's point.
Well, it'll be if it's in the pack, it'll be added in there.
Okay, I think we've got to where we need to just get this matter to go forward. I think it's shown there's a genuine commitment on behalf of this council in order to support this, and thank you for all the work that's been put in by Jonathan, Sue, Tim and his team. So can we, Julie, please look to take a vote on the amendment as proposed?
Okay, councillors, I'll call your names in alphabetical order, so it's for, against or abstain. Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Councillor Brereton.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Projak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for all of that, and thanks for the input of other members here tonight who obviously are very passionate about where we get with this particular neighbourhood plan, quite rightly. If we can move on to agenda item 10. This is the report from Ben Hook to adopt the Rother Economic Recovery Action Plan. Ben, are you still with us?
I am, Chair, yes, of course.
Chairman, I'd like to redeclare my personal interest.
Thank you, Carl. Who else? Anybody else? No?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Catherine. And okay, Ben, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So officers were asked to pull together a economic recovery plan for the district following the COVID-19 pandemic. This was done with the consultation of the Economic Recovery Steering Group, and the decision was made to formulate the recovery plan in line with the East Sussex Reset Recovery Plan, which is the East Sussex wide recovery plan that's being supported through Team East Sussex, which is the federated sub-board of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership for the area. So we have formatted it in the same way, with under the 6 ambitions. And what we've tried to do is take those overarching ambitions and give them a really local focus. I don't intend at this point in time to go through all of the specific actions. These were debated quite extensively at the two East Sussex, at the two Rother District Recovery Steering Group committees that we held. This is the recommendation of that steering group to Cabinet. What we will seek to do following its adoption is to continue to meet with the portfolio holder on a very regular basis, every couple of weeks, to keep her updated as to progress that's being made against this plan, and then convene the steering group once every 6 months to give them a proper full update, and then report back to probably to overview and scrutiny on an annual basis, to give them so that all members of the council are given the opportunity to scrutinise the progress we make against this plan. Other than that, Chairman, I hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Councillor Christine Bayliss, I know you've been very much involved in bringing this together with the Economic Recovery Steering Group. Any comments to add to Ben's?
Yes, I've got a few comments to add to this. And I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the members of the Economic Steering Group, Recovery Steering Group, for their inputs. This was a cross-party steering group, and everybody really played their part. We used the East Sussex County Council reset plan as a sort of basis, and so that we can sort of, if you like, if that's the macro model, this is the micro on the ground rollout of actions, which will hopefully go to sort of make sure that the effects of COVID are as minimised as possible. There are just a few things I'd like to sort of to raise. Under the digital bit, which is the sort of final, the future is digital, we really sort of see that as being one of the sort of key actions that this council needs to roll out. I mean, if you were going to have I accept what Councillor Field mentioned earlier, and if you were going to put an environmental section in here, which perhaps we should have had, you would have said that sections like on the digital, improving the digital economy, can make a considerable impact on carbon emissions, because people can work from home and they're not having to travel in the same way that they did pre-COVID. I think there's something really exciting about the future is digital. We want to build on the sort of model, some of the models like Councillor Vinehall's experiment in Southampton, which seems to have been really successful in rolling out superfast broadband there. I want to raise under the building skills and creating jobs. Members will know that we have raised the issue of childcare and the worries that we've got about the closure of the two county council outstanding nurseries in both Central Ward and Sidley, where my colleague Councillor Coleman is a councillor. These really are key facilities for young people, and I had a very, very encouraging phone call today with Councillor Michael Ensor, who's the county councillor for Bexhill North, this morning, who is now doing some work on the East Sussex County Council side to make sure they're aligned with our officers, Ben Hook at Rother District Council, to make sure that we can actually progress really quickly, and that the nurseries can continue in their current buildings post the beginning of January. Of course, the sort of area, I suppose, that suffered the most, this is nationally, not only just in Rother, is the retail sector. We've sort of seen in places, I mean, I obviously know Bexhill very well, but I picked up intelligence from Battle and from Rye that, the sort of non-food sector, the retail sector, in our town centres have suffered. So we're really, really pleased that we were able to sort of use the Reopening High Streets Safely funding that comes through from the European Union and from the Department for Communities and Local Government for a Christmas shopping campaign, a Christmas shopping local campaign. And I just think we need to keep people's fingers crossed then actually we can actually make something of that and encourage our residents to shop local, keep it local, keep jobs local, you know, I ask that the Cabinet endorse the plan, support it, you know, it will be regularly monitored, I can assure members of that, and if there are any issues which need to be brought forward more urgently than once every 6 months, I absolutely commit to doing that.
Thank you, Christine. Have we got someone you're leading this report? Have we got someone to second this report?
I think Councillor Timpey was going to second it.
Thank you. Hazel?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I second. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you again, Ben, Christine, and the steering group, the task group, steering group, whatever, that worked on this. There's some good output here. Julie, can we please...
It's okay, so I'll call your names in alphabetical order, so it's for, against, or abstain. Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Councillor Brewerton.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. If we can move into agenda item 11. This is the report to approve works to improve the accessibility and the appearance of a Wainwright Road car park. Thank you, Carl. You want to make a...
Redeclare my personal interest as Executive Member of East Sussex County Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Redeclare as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so this really is the budget to be allocated to improve work to this car park, which is really almost very much touching onto the town centre and the implications of CPE with regard to getting this car park in full use. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a report bringing forward a request for £50,000 to be allocated towards the Wainwright Road car park, which is obviously probably the second car park that would be utilised for the town centre following that, the Delaware Pavilion. Obviously, the introduction of civil parking enforcement on our streets within the district will have a significant effect on people parking in and around the Bexhill town centre area. What this report seeks to do is to make the Wainwright Road car park a more appealing destination to park your car, make it more accessible to people, and also make people more aware of it through improved signage, both for pedestrians and for drivers. What I would say is, whilst I failed massively to note the environmental implications of a economic recovery report, which has a whole section on green economy, I have managed to get some environmental implications on a car park makeover in on this one. So
well done, Ben.
Thank you. So yeah, this is basically what we're seeking to do here. Is we're seeking to improve the highway signage, encourage people to park slightly out of town and walk into town, reducing congestion in the actual town centre itself, improve the pedestrian signage so that people know the best and most appropriate way to go. We're going to improve the surfaces around of the footways leading to the car park. What we're not looking to do at this stage is we're not looking to resurface the car park as a whole. Having considered that option, it was considered to be slightly too expensive at this stage, but should it need it in years to come following increased usage, then we can make that decision at a later date. But yeah, so this is for £50,000 to improve the accessibility and presentation of Wainwright Road car park to make it more appealing to residents and users of Bexhill Town Centre.
Thank you very much, Ben. Christine, you've moved this report. It's to be seconded by...
Second by Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Second by Catherine. Okay. Councillor Paul Cortell. Paul, did you want to make a comment before we go to a vote on this?
Yes, please, Chair. I'd like to strongly support this proposal from Councillor Bayliss. This car park is hardly used. It's a car park in my ward, so I have a strong interest in it. The access path is muddy. It's unkempt. There's unkempt plant growth. It feels remote and unlit. If I were a woman, I'd be very apprehensive about walking along it, particularly in the dark. Wainwright Road car park needs to be made appealing, accessible and properly signaged. I know my ward colleague, Councillor Bayliss, feels passionately about this, and she has my full support.
Yeah, I think for all those reasons, this is why the work's being done, Paul. So thank you for just endorsing those. Julie, if we can go to a vote on this, thank you very much. So proposed by Christine, seconded by Catherine Field, and a vote, Julie, please.
Councillor Field has just indicated again, so I don't know if she wants to.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, Catherine. I didn't see a second beep there. I have now.
Yes, I can't let that go. It isn't just women who are vulnerable in untidy, intimidating car parks. It's men and it's children. It's all of us. We all need and are entitled to safe spaces.
Yeah. Yes, all users. You're absolutely right. Okay, Julie, we're there.
Okay, I'll call your names in alphabetical order, so it's 4 against, or abstain. Councillor Bayliss.
Very much for.
Councillor Brereton.
4.
Councillor Byrne.
4.
Councillor Dixon.
4.
Councillor Field.
4.
Councillor Oliver.
4.
Councillor Prochak.
4.
Councillor Tempe.
4.
And Councillor Vinehall.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
And thank you very much, Ben, for spinning this round very, very quickly, because I know you've been under lots of other demands, but it was a piece of a report we wanted to get forward to get the work done, certainly before the winter sets on. Okay, so we are at the additional item, Julie. Yes, additional agenda item 2 is item 12. This has come out of the fact that there's been an approach by the retailers in Battle, Bexhill and Rye to seek our proposals on extending the free parking days in those town centres. And some work's been done on this with Joe and Catherine. So, Joe, are you ready to put this report forward, please?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chair. As the leader says, we've been approached by Bexhill Town, the Chamber of Commerce, in Bexhill over this issue. In previous years, just to put this in context, in previous years the council has granted 3 days of free parking to Bexhill, Battle and Rye, and in December, just for the same reason, to encourage shoppers to those towns in this time of year, or so that's in that season. And historically, we've applied that under a delegated authority, which allows up to 7 days, and presently we're asking for 9 days. The proposal is for every Thursday and Saturday in December to be free, which equates to 9 days. To put that into some sort of context for you in terms of the lost income, the council would lose income of approximately 20,000 for the 3 days across the car parks, and that's an additional 13,000 to what we would normally lose in revenue on the 3 days that we normally do. Of course, car park income has been impacted by the first lockdown and the decision to make parking free under those circumstances, and the present we're looking at about £150,000 deficit across all car parks for the year, but obviously that's vulnerable to further lockdowns, which we're about to go into. And it's also important to, I think, highlight that that there's obviously then a risk to the restriction in income. But obviously the idea is to encourage during this period, especially as lockdown will be lifted in December. That's the proposal at the moment, that this would time with that lifting of restrictions, encouragement for the population, shoppers, to go into town and use those car parks, and also try and disperse over a greater number of days, the number of people in the town centre, so going up to 9 and giving more people a chance to socially distance. So happy to take questions from the floor.
Thank you. Catherine, did you want to make any observations here, or shall I take Councillor Bayliss first and then Councillor Osborne and then you sum up?
Well, I was going to start actually, but if Kevin,
please do.
I will move it, and I think Councillor Dixon is going to second, so presumably he could reserve his comments and sum up if necessary. Okay. I think this will be very welcome by residents. I have some experience of this, but actually the real issue with the free parking is when it was reduced, the reputational damage suffered by the council and the comments and irritation expressed by residents and traders alike when the free parking was withdrawn did an awful lot of damage to the council. I don't know about the cost of this, Joe. I wasn't sure if you meant the net increase cost or if the actual cost, because of course now we're charging for more car parks. I would assume we can afford to withstand the loss of the parking charges on the proposed days. Businesses need this boost every year, but they need it particularly this year. And if we are still locked down then, which we might well be in December, certainly in Battle High Street, and I know that very well, of course, there are plenty of food businesses there who would welcome this. And the excuse that people often give for driving to out of town supermarkets is that, oh, it's heavy, we've got more choice, we can't carry it home if we've walked into town. Well, of course, if they can park for free, that excuse is gone. They can shop locally. It is slightly more expensive in local businesses to shop, I agree. But if you factor in the cost of not driving to out of town, then it is a pleasant experience. It's a very much a value for money experience. And of course, you're doing your local high streets some good. And the council benefits from the increased business to the high streets as well, in the form of non-domestic rate. So this, I believe, is everybody winning. And I do hope Cabinet will support this.
I think it's absolutely vital that we continue to give our businesses as much support as we can through this. Christine, Councillor Bayliss. Yep.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say, wholeheartedly support this. I think it absolutely marries with the recovery plan that we've just put forward. Yeah, well done, Battle, in bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Osborne. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a little bit of history on this. I think originally, many years ago, it always used to be sort of free parking for the week prior to Christmas, and I moved it many years ago to the weekends in December, leading up to Christmas, which worked better with the Chambers of Commerce in Rye, I know especially, because it stopped their members parking in the car parks and blocking them all up for the week before Christmas. So I support it fully, but the only question I've got is, I'm looking at my calendar, I can't find 9 days. We're locked down until the 2nd, so we've got Thursday the 3rd and Saturday the 5th. Then we've got the 10th and the 13th. Then we've got the 17th and the 19th, and then Christmas is on the 25th. So I can get to a maximum of 7 days. We don't want to offer free parking after Christmas because it's a bit late.
Joe, can you just identify? Is that right, or?
Yeah, that point was made to members that the whole of December is 9 days because it's Boxing Day and New Year's Eve, the other 2 days. Okay. But the 7 days before bringing this report, that was made clear that we do have the authority for the 7 days, which are the 7 days before Christmas.
Yeah. Okay. So we've added in the Boxing Day and the New Year's Eve. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it worth just clarifying Catherine's question as well on the rather than thinking about this as cost, it's lost income, and it's an average over 3 years for the specific car parks we're looking at those times of year. So that's how the approximate loss of income has been arrived at.
Okay. Okay, those points taken. Kevin, I think you're going to second this report, and whether you wish to sum up at all before we go to a vote. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and I'm pleased to second this report. A lot of retailers rely on Christmas trade to survive for the whole year, and this year, of course, now it's going to be on a knife edge whether a lot of our small businesses will survive. This is something we can do as a council, along with the Christmas lighting that we've already put forward earlier this evening, and it will be very interesting to see how it will work. And we take Councillor Osborne's point on board. There isn't 9 days, but this is something different. I think we're going to try with a Boxing Day and maybe Boxing Day sales. New Year's Eve is going to be probably quite important this year. I think a lot of people would like to celebrate the fact we can get rid of this year, well and truly. So, and we'll see if there's any feedback from the towns on whether free parking on those days actually also makes a difference. So, very, very pleased to second this as a one-off. And we'll see and evaluate how well businesses do. The one thing I would like to add, I don't think we've actually got a recommendation before us. It's just resolved that we thought on whether we agree. Could I add a caveat that we ask the communications department in the council to heavily promote this when we know what days we're going to do, and really try and push this so that people get the message and shop locally. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Kevin. And I think the evaluation is always worthwhile, because we need then to see whether we can measure the impact of this on the assumption that we don't get a continued lockdown. Thanks very much, Joe and Catherine, for putting this work together at fairly short notice. And if we can, we've got a proposer, we've got a second. Julie, if we can just call a vote on this, thank you. Would that include that amendment to ensure that we do promote this far and wide?
Is it worth clarifying that we're voting to go to 9 days, Julie?
Yes.
Yes, we can do, yes.
Yep.
So you're the 9 days, and that includes Boxing Day and New Year's Eve.
Correct.
Okay, so members, I'll call your names in alphabetical order. You need to say for, against, or abstain. So Councillor Bayliss.
For.
Councillor Brewerton.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Dixon.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Prochak.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
And Councillor Vinehall.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Julie. Thank you, Claire, for your work in the background. I think we're at the point of completing the agenda for this evening. It has gone on a little longer, but I think there's been some really interesting debate in there, and there are some very, very important items that we did need to carry off. So it's not about timing. It's a case that we actually fulfil the business in front of us to deal with. It's a very important time to do that. So thank you very much. Malcolm, I think, is still looking to make a small presentation based on some meetings that he's been involved in. So if we can close the meeting, Claire, and those that wish to remain, please do so. Thank you.